Heyo, I'm Will, and I'm one of those people who always love the villains way more than the protagonists. The Tricks, Azula, the Fatui Harbingers, Hannibal, those are some of my favorite characters, and all I want is to see them succeed in their morally questionable endeavors. But sadly, some of them never really did, so in 2020, I had the amazing idea to just make my own villain characters to obliterate everything in their past. And thus, Disaster Universe, aka the world I slept all of my OCs into, was born. Basically, there's humanoid beings called demons who have always existed on Earth but had to live in secret among humans. Demons have access to special powers, they age differently from humans and are generally more resilient, which is why some of them believe they are the superior race and have the natural right to rule over those weaker than them. A fraction of those demons decided to overthrow the human rulership by force and make their own rules. I have a ton of art for some of the main characters in the story, but a lot of it is kind of outdated and I wanted to settle on concrete designs / outfits since I want to do a bigger project with them eventually, like a comic or animations. So we're redesigning some of the villains today. Starting off with the most important character, the secret leader of the demon uprising and the vicious man whose name the story's title is based around, Aster. To give you a short summary of who he is. Evil bastard man. He's a very powerful demon who manipulated his way to the top of the food chain, brought the government under his control, and is someone whose bad side you never wanna be on. He's narcissistic, does not care about anyone who can't help him further his goals, and thinks he's justified in doing pretty much whatever he pleases. This is a man who's sitting on so many bodies that even if you wanted to count them, you'd probably end up being one of them in the meantime. And if you couldn't already tell, this video is going to cover some darker topics, so if you don't vibe with that, this is your warning. When I first designed Aster in 2020, he had a very odd haircut. I literally do not know why I thought it was a good idea to part his hair like that. It looks so awkward. His barber should have been arrested, honestly. Aster's personality was also way different back then. He was a literal college student rat man, and I just pretend that era doesn't exist because it's just so cursed when thinking about who he is now. They are literally different characters. As I continued working on him, he slowly but surely became more evil and edgy, which turned him into what he is today. A spoiled favorite child and also pale as hell. Time stole his melanin, guys. I don't even know how that happened, but I guess he is very capitalist white guy core, so maybe that's why. Over time, his design kind of designed itself, and I'm actually very happy with his overall look. I think the throat markings and spiky ear piercings give him a very recognizable design. So the focus for today is more on giving him cool clothing and making a proper character sheet I can reference when drawing his face at different angles. His clothing style is kind of what you would expect from a rich guy who has a lot of influence over politics, meaning mainly suits. So I set out to give him a variety of different types of suits for different occasions. To start off, I drew him in underwear to have a good reference for the markings he has on his body. And no, they're not tattoos. I explained how markings work more in detail in this video, but all you need to know for now is that they're a demon thing and show where he can transform his body parts. If you want to watch the other video too, I'll remind you at the end, don't worry. I think this is also one of the only times you will be able to see his feet, so enjoy it while it lasts and don't ask me how his socks don't tear to shreds. He probably has to wear metal caps on his socks or something. I want to talk a bit about how Aster got to his hype position because I think it says a lot about his character. Essentially, in this world, demons thrived like way back in history, but some humans got scared of them, spread a bunch of lies mixed with half-truths, and witch hunted every single demon who wasn't living completely secluded from them, or who could pass as a human. Skip forward a couple of centuries and demons have been forgotten, but live in hidden places filled with mostly demons and some other non-human creatures. You can imagine those places kind of like entering a room through a door, but if you put in a certain passcode, you end up in a different room even though it's the same door, and also that secret room can be bigger or shaped differently than the original room, except on a much bigger scale, like there's whole cities hidden in these pocket spaces. However, there's not an infinite amount of space in there, and the pockets themselves are rare, so demons have very limited room to live and or exist in without having to conceal themselves. Over time, and with demon populations recovering from the witch hunting of the past, A lot of demons grew resentful that they had to live like this, which is understandable, yet many of them wanted to live in peace together with the humans. But this resentment was an opportunity which demons who straight up hated humans took to build up a bigger movement. Aster ended up being the one who finally co-opted the movement by playing his cards at the right time, while having powerful allies among both humans and demons. His whole shtick was that publicly, he talked about how important peace and freedom is for his people, but behind closed doors, he put gasoline in the fire of hatred with the more extremist wing of the movement. So there were a lot of demons who thought the movement was going to bring peace and coexistence with the humans. Meanwhile, Aster was preparing an army to straight up seize power, no matter how many would have to die. I think all of this kind of makes it sound like Aster is a famous politician or something, but he's actually more a behind the scenes kind of guy, pulling the strings. As self-centered as he is, he would love to be admired and worshipped, but he knows that being the poster child of a political movement is very risky. It essentially puts a bullseye right on your forehead, so he has some puppets filling that role for him. So yeah, he does not care about who lives and who dies, he only really cares that he's on the winning side and making a profit from it. In general, he cares for only very select few people. And when I say care, I say that very generously, because in Aster terms, that just means he would be annoyed if they died because they were either useful to him or his personal squeaky toy entertainment. Dr. Darcy and 𝓐𝓼𝓽𝓮 are two of these valued individuals. Darcy is the lead scientist in his team, so naturally they're kinda important, and 𝓐𝓼𝓽𝓮 is basically like his very big guard dog, but these are two characters we will get back to later. By this point in the drawing process, I was feeling a bit tired, so it was time to do something else. I used my break to set up my UnVale profile, who also happens to be the sponsor of today's video. If you love making your own characters or looking at what other artists come up with, UnVale is a website I can wholeheartedly recommend. You can set up pages for your OCs with as many pictures as you like, a description, written lore, and a bunch of traits like personality, age, species, and literally whatever else you want people to know about. If you have multiple characters that are in the same story, like the characters in this video, you can add them to worlds as well. Setting up my characters and profile was honestly super easy. I had to think about how long it took me to set up my toy house in comparison, and don't get me wrong, toy house has its own strength, but if you want simple and fast, UnVale is a perfect fit. UnVale is also against AI and NFTs, which is really comforting to hear. You can check out my UnVale profile and set up your own with the link in the description. Go write some comments to further Aster's ego. Thank you so much for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the designs. Okay, now settle in because it's time for suits, and this is none other than suit connoisseur Will talking. This first one is one of the fancier suits meant for special occasions. It's a 3-piece, aka it has a jacket, pants, and vest, with the jacket lapels and the shirt collar having metal edges. For Aster's shirt cuffs, I decided it would be boring to just put normal buttons, so I gave him spike cufflinks. Previously, I always drew Aster wearing bow ties, which some people find to look silly, and honestly, I kind of have to agree. I like bow ties, but personally, I don't think they would fit super well on a serious character like Aster, so I opted for giving him normal ties instead. As for the colors, I already knew I wanted his signature suit to be either dark blue or black with blue accents like in this artwork. I put some shiny stripes on his vest and also wanted to add a pattern to the lapels of his suit, so I tested out a few and eventually had the awesome idea of taking my chain brush and using it as a pattern. I think this is very fitting for a character that's all about being in control and essentially enslaving a bunch of people. He also got a couple of different hairstyle variations, though they're not super different from each other, but that's also because I don't think Aster would change his haircut a lot. The first one is his default gelled back hair, then an ungelled version that has a bit more volume and looks more modern. This is low-key how my hair looks too when it's freshly washed, except I'm not blonde. And the other two hairstyles are essentially varying levels of disheveled. If you see Aster with the less messy one, you should start worrying and avoid him at all costs because he's a ticking time bomb, while the super messy one tells you to run immediately because that man is not holding back anything at that point. Next up is a more casual suit which he can wear without a tie and an open shirt collar. One of the things I started doing when drawing Aster in suits was to also give him spikes on his shoulder pads, to mirror his ear piercings. And I really love the look, so most of the suits have these. He definitely gets them tailor-made anyway, so whoever makes them is used to him asking for shoulder spikes by now. I just want this man's design to be as pointy as possible, if you haven't noticed yet. If anyone tried to hug him, the chance of them accidentally cutting themselves and bleeding out would not be low. Granted that they would probably die by his hand for trying to even come close to him before then. I went with a similar color scheme as before, inspired by this old drawing I made of him. And then I gave him another fancy suit because one is clearly not enough. Listen guys, I just love suits a lot, okay? They look cool and they're nice to draw because shapes. This time it's a double-breasted suit, meaning it has 2 rows of buttons instead of 1 down the middle. Fun fact, only 2 of the 6 buttons here are actually functional. The rest are for aesthetics only. Okay, this is such a minute detail that I don't think anyone but me cares about this. But his other suits only had 3 buttons on the side of the wrist, but this one has 4. More buttons usually means it's a fancier suit. I am not obsessed with suits at all, guys, for real, trust! Color-wise, I went with the suit being mostly black with red accents. This is honestly a very recent color scheme I came up with for Aster, but I think it fits him well, especially since it contrasts with his blue eyes and the fact that he has ice powers. I also added some leather gloves to this one at the end to make it look even cooler. And a lot more edgy. And to complete his suit wardrobe, I gave him an outfit with just a vest for semi-formal occasions that I colored in grays and red as well. It's likely he also has a jacket for this, but you know, I don't need to draw literally his whole closet. There would be a lot of suits. Okay, but we're not done yet because Aster is my favorite child and there's one very important outfit that I really wanted to design. Aster is a bit of a clean freak and he absolutely hates his suits getting dirty. It's like a personal insult to him and he has 100% killed people over this, but at the same time, he will absolutely get his hands dirty because after all, he's one of the only competent people in his eyes. So I needed an outfit that was specifically made for him to go out and curb people. Something that's splash proof and has utility on the battlefield. The main idea that stuck in my head was him in a big leather coat with slightly messed up hair, spilling blood left and right. And honestly, that's kinda badass, so that's exactly what I went for. At first I wasn't sure whether I wanted to draw him with the coat closed, because it gave a really nice silhouette, but also it looked more restrictive and didn't show what's going on underneath. So instead I opted to go with the open coat look. Underneath the coat he's wearing a simple turtleneck shirt with leather pants and boots. I wanted something cool to be happening on his upper body though, so I went with this chest harness thing. Honestly, it looks like it has utility beyond looking cool, but at this point in time I'm not exactly sure what it's for. My ideas were that it could be used to attach a backpack or other gear, and it's metal plated in the back to protect Aster from enemies on his hindside. While wounds from bullets are not even close to being fatal for a demon like Aster, they are an inconvenience, so better be safe than sorry. Powerful demons can heal pretty quickly, so yeah, this man would be hard to take out. Aster also has a gun strapped to his leg, which he wouldn't use too often, since he's straight up way more OP using his demon powers, but a gun would come in a lot more handy when dealing with people who aren't supposed to know you're a demon. The main power he uses in combat is his ice powers, which he has mastered to a T, to a point where he could be standing perfectly still and summon a bunch of ice shards to stab his enemies. Usually, demons need to do something in order to summon their powers, which ranges from person to person, but it's usually either saying specific words, gesturing, or using a specific object. Meaning if you had a demon that casts by saying something, you can literally incapacitate them by putting your hand in their mouth. Although I would not recommend doing that if they have sharp teeth. Though I like to imagine he would still flick his wrist or some other lazy gesture like that, just cause it would be so menacing that this dude can kill a bunch of people with a literal flick of his wrist. He also wields one of the most sought after demon powers belonging to the so-called deadly sins. And no, they're not the typical deadly sins of pride, gluttony, etc, because I felt like those were a bit overused and I wanted to explore some other concepts. More on that another time though, because it would be a bit too much to get into here. I haven't drawn Aster using his powers that often, like the only examples are these 2 shots from an animatic I made about him a couple months back. If you want to watch it, I would menu at the end of the video. I originally wanted to include some concept art of him using his powers, but because I spent literal ages on this sheet already, and still had at least one more character to design, I just didn't have the time nor the energy to do that. Would be a fun thing for the future though. Okay, but back to the gun topic. When he intimidates someone, he would change his strategy based on who he's talking to, since demons would be able to sense how powerful Aster is, while humans would be more scared of staring down the barrel of a gun, even though that can't do nearly as much harm as Aster could using his powers. Also, I just need to say, I am so proud of the belt buckles on this one, because I was just gonna go for a generic buckle type at first, but then decided to do something more interesting, and came up with a buckle design on my own. But yeah, obviously the look has to be as deadly as possible, so the coat, boots, and gloves all have spikes on them too. For the coat outfit, which I dubbed murder outfit by the way, I tested out 3 different color schemes, being black and red, black and blue, or a more monotone gray color scheme. I like the red and gray ones the most. The red is super iconic and looked the most visually pleasing to me, but the gray had a lot more of an inconspicuous undercover vibe that I also really liked a lot. I ended up going with the red because I just love shading red. It also gives the outfit an extra hint of danger. Now, before we move on, I'm not sure if this video will do well since OC content is harder to get traction on, so if you guys enjoyed it so far, consider leaving a like on the video or joining my Patreon. Believe it or not, but all the Aster art I made in this video took me 20 plus hours to design and draw, and part of the reason I'm able to keep making these videos are my lovely supporters over on Patreon. If you're interested in joining, there's a bunch of different rewards you can get access to, like HD files of my art, unedited time-lapse videos, drawings of your characters, and your name at the end of my videos, and much more, starting at $2 a month. By joining, you really help me keep making more content like this, but obviously you're already supporting me a ton by simply watching these videos, so thank you. All of Aster's outfits are done, but I already mentioned I wanted to make a reference sheet that shows off important details, and especially his face at different angles, so my life would be easier whenever I decide to do something with Disaster Universe. So I made another canvas to slap all of that onto. I started off with a detailed look at a shoe from the side, since one important detail couldn't be seen on the suit outfits due to his pose, that detail being spikes on the back of his shoes, cause you know he doesn't already have enough spikes clearly. You technically already saw this one on his boots with the coat, but it's actually a feature I added when I made this illustration, which was made to be animated in Live 2D. I thought it would look cool in motion, and to this day I still think it's one of the most satisfying things I made in Live 2D. But anyways, I also wanted a little call out for the handkerchief he has in his suit pocket, since it has the letter A embroidered into it. You can decide if it stands for Aster or asshole. Another super important thing were his eye and brow, since I always draw Aster with a very specific kind of eye and brow shape, without which he just doesn't look like himself. He has very slim but long eyes that tilt upwards toward the outer edge, which is a look that makes characters seem elegant or dangerous, depending on how you pull it off. And of course, even his eyeballs needed to be armed, so he has exactly 3 sharp eyelashes. Man's not warding off dust with those though. And you can also see that his pupils are slitted since he is a demon. He has kind of thick eyebrows that have a hook at the arch for some extra edge. One detail I debated about was his waterline, cause I usually just draw it like it is for humans, aka pink or skin colored, but technically that wouldn't make sense for him since humans have red blood which makes the area pink, whereas his blood is blue. I tested out a couple different shades and eventually settled on this light blue. Though not gonna lie, I am totally gonna forget to add this in all future drawings. It is a neat detail though. Now for the actual face angles though. I started with the front and side views first because I knew those were gonna be the hardest to make look good. So if I got those down, the rest would be pretty simple. You may have already seen that I did the forbidden thing of tracing. Wee-oo. Yeah, that's right. VildrArt is a tracer and a thief of his own art. Listen, faces can be hard to get right sometimes, and when you have a drawing that looks 99% how the character is supposed to look, you use that. So yeah, I traced over this old drawing of him and changed everything that I wanted to improve upon. For the side view, I kinda did the same thing as well, except the drawing I traced over was from a low angle, with him slightly turned away from the viewer, so I had to adjust a lot more things. This was a bit scary, but honestly, it turned out even better than the front-facing one, which is awesome. Especially since I don't think I draw side profiles a lot. But yeah, I really wanted to cement what his features are supposed to look like so that he looks consistent when I want to draw him in the future. Both front and side view have pretty neutral expressions for clarity, but oh boy, it is time for some funkier angles and cool expressions. The third face isn't that interesting because I also just traced it, but I do really love this one. It's a disgusted kind of look, like he's looking down at 𝓐𝓼𝓽𝓮𝓻 for wanting to be his knife block. I respect the simping, okay, I really do. Aster's gonna have this expression a lot because he's disgusted by like 99% of all beings ever. Then I drew him being really angry, yelling in rage with some of his hair coming loose. I think the initial sketch for this one was so ugly, but somehow I salvaged it and got to this beauty, so I'm not gonna complain. Despite Aster usually being calm and collected, he does have a pretty bad temper, and you do not ever, and I mean ever, want to be the target of his anger because that is when he is the most destructive. You could be as useful to him as it gets, but if you mess up bad enough, you're dead meat. Another important expression for me was one where he had his mouth open with his tongue sticking out because Aster has a very much not normal kind of tongue. It's more like a glowing tentacle, to be honest. Because Aster is a powerful demon, he doesn't really have many organs inside his body, which leaves a lot of space for his tongue to retract to. Unlike with humans or other demons, his tongue is not attached to his lower jaw, but comes up all the way through his throat, and can also pull all the way back. This is connected to his throat markings, which can, in fact, turn into a gaping, sharp-toothed maw, so his tongue needs to be usable there too. It's like a multitask tongue. I also shaded his tongue here to show off what it looks like. It's essentially a gradient from bright turquoise to black, and it also glows in the dark like a glow stick. And the back of his mouth also glows. Aster would look sick at a blacklight party, not gonna lie. I'm curious which one of these is your favorite Aster expression, let me know. Okay, now we're actually moving on to the next character. Can you believe it? We get it, Aster, you want to take up a lot of space in everyone's lives, but I think 20 minutes is enough for today. So yeah, moving on to Dr. Darcy, who I have very briefly mentioned already. They're the head scientist working for Aster, and they are, how do I say this? Insane. Like, insane, you know, as in, there is no sane thought in their mind, like, ever. Aster picked them up when they were about to get prosecuted for doing some messed up experiment on humans right after they graduated med school. The first time I drew them was about a year ago, and I don't think I even drew them with the intent to make an OC, but it was just a random doodle that turned out cool, so they became an OC. But the initial lore they had was that they were a non-binary scientist who's crazy smart for their age and also just crazy regardless of age. I don't think they were even connected to Aster at all back then until I decided I wanted to yeet all of my OCs into one story, and so Aster essentially picked them up for their know-how and willingness to work on unethical projects. For their updated design, I mainly wanted to polish their clothing a bit, give them legs because I don't think I've ever drawn those before, draw their face and especially the hair from different angles like I did for Aster, and maybe give them an alternate outfit as well. One really important thing I had to settle on was actually how the heck they still look like they did back when they joined Aster, when they were like 19 about a century ago, which we will get to in a moment. I also wanted to give them some other hairstyles, and you could see me sketch those, but I ended up forgetting about them. I might redo them in the future though. Definitely want to make some more OC videos sometime. So, how does Darcy manage to look so young despite being older than your grandparents? I had a couple of ideas on how that would work out. My first idea was for Darcy's actual body to be in some sort of cryo-sleep state so it doesn't age, but their mind would still be able to steer an almost identical robot/puppet version of themselves, with the possibility of there being multiple of those puppets they can control at once. However, I felt like that was a bit too OP, so I decided that Darcy had their entire torso replaced with mechanical parts, while their limbs and head were still real flesh. Don't ask me how this stops them from aging, I don't have the knowledge that Darcy has. Part of the reason they did this to themselves was also gender dysphoria, and like, honestly, what person with gender dysphoria and futuristic medical knowledge wouldn't do this? Trade offer, you lose body parts that make you feel icky and gain the ability to play Minecraft at all times. Anyways, I had the fun idea to make their torso look like a gamer PC because I think that's pretty unique. I'm sure other characters that have something similar exist, but usually when you have cyborg characters, they just have body parts that look like solid metal, and I didn't want Darcy to look too combat-y. They may be incredibly smart, but they can't fight for shit. Chances are if they get cornered, they will surrender laughing and then proceed to annoy their enemies by just being themselves. I love Darcy, they are my crazy gremlin child. Alright, now for the actual outfit, I went with a lab coat because they work in the lab. Wow, who would have guessed? Besides the lab coat, Darcy has more of an alternative clothing style though. In the original Darcy drawing, they have this chest harness thingy on, and I wanted them to keep something similar, so I tried sketching a couple different ones. I liked that it kind of looked like ribs, but ended up making it more asymmetrical to be more fitting for such an unhinged character. Back in the OG drawing, I also gave them this baby girl looking bow tied loosely around their neck, as well as a spiky choker, and I really loved that vibe for them, so I kept those. And then the pants. Honestly, I had no idea where to go with the pants, so I just kind of went for it. I wanted to bring some of the bow fabric down to the pants as well by putting this lace on their thigh. It literally has no function at all, but it fits Darcy's fashion sense really well. And of course, I had to go with plateau shoes with a bunch of studs on them. The colors were a bit harder to figure out here because I wanted to keep the dark gray, red and yellow color scheme from the OG drawing, but it was difficult to make that look good. I was also having trouble because I still hadn't colored their torso yet properly, which could make or break the whole color scheme, so I went back to work on that. I had to switch around values a bunch, but eventually I made it work out, and now it looks really cool, to be honest. I really love the gamer PC vibe that their torso has. Especially with the colors, it looks so much cooler. Now the second outfit. I wanted this one to be an outfit they would wear if they're doing more invasive experiments, or generally things that could get bloody or messy, but it still needed to have an unhinged vibe. Dr. Darcy can't go into the lab looking like a regular old doctor after all. So yeah, I got out some straitjacket references for the Asylum Drip. The first version I came up with was more of almost a mermaid dress? A straitjacket for mermaids maybe? Except I left the belts at the bottom open so their legs could actually move around. But then I changed it to be pants instead because I don't really see Darcy wearing dresses, or at least not those kind of dresses. I also tried swapping out the belts with safety pins because safety pins look scuffed in a creepy way. Like, if a doctor comes in with their coat being closed by safety pins, it's probably time to run. I ended up liking the belts more, but don't you worry, you might have seen that the safety pins ended up on the other outfit already. I also put open belts onto the sleeves just to make the straitjacket vibes more obvious. Small tangent, but one of the major projects Darcy has worked on for Aster is actually Smolder, his big guard dog beast. I don't want to say too much about Smolder because I'm probably gonna make a new design for them as well, but it's basically a being created by Darcy. And while Aster mainly values Smolder for the fact that it's more loyal than people and follows orders like a dog, Darcy genuinely likes Smolder and treats them as if it were their beloved pet. You know that trend where a person goes, "This is why I'm not afraid to walk alone at night," and then they show their scary looking dogs? Yeah, that's Darcy, except the dog is like 3 times as tall as them. I don't know, I kinda love the villain trope where the villain doesn't care for human life, but they treat animals with so much kindness and respect. It's just kinda cute, I don't know. Okay, but back to the outfit. As for the colors, I definitely wanted to keep this one fairly light. I tested out if red would work well for the belts, but I decided that black was better. I originally went with the stomach gamer PC window, but changed that back to be closed later, cause it didn't really make too much sense to show it off here, especially because the other outfit already showed it. Expression time. You saw me do these for Aster, we're doing them for Darcy too. Honestly, the front-facing one was harder than I expected it would be, but also I have definitely not drawn Darcy nearly as much as I have drawn Aster, so this should have come to no surprise. They didn't really look like themselves, so I experimented around with the eye shape a lot, until I eventually found one that looks accurate. And now they are staring into all of our souls, just as intended. For the side profile, I literally copy-pasted a recent drawing I did because I really like this one already. Why fix it if it ain't broken, you know? The other angles I had to do from scratch though, because again, not many Darcy drawings exist yet, sadly. The next one is an unhinged expression. No surprise there if you've been listening to me talking about what kind of person Darcy is. Then we have an expression that reminds me of the no bitches meme. Darcy is either questioning or judging whatever it is you're doing. Pick whichever is worse, I guess. And the last expression is them looking shocked and or traumatized. I think their faces all came out really good and in character. I'm glad I managed to pull that off. While coloring these, I was listening to a video about religious cults and deconstructing, aka when you question parts of or the entirety of your faith, and the person talking low-key sounded a bit like what I imagined Darcy would sound like. But anyways, the religious cult topic made me think about how interesting it would be if Darcy grew up in that sort of environment, so I came up with new lore on accident. Essentially, Darcy's parents were already religious when Darcy was born, but they were fairly average people. However, they always thought Darcy was a strange kid who acted way different from other kids their age, and they never really understood them. Eventually, the parents got roped in by this cult who promised them they would fix Darcy if only all three of them devoted themselves to worship and prayer. Except that didn't help, so they tried to exorcise Darcy until eventually, Darcy ran away. Darcy doesn't have the most fleshed out backstory right now, and you can probably tell I had a lot less to say about them than about Aster, but that's how it is sometimes. The last thing I added was to design the ID card that they have pinned to their code. I wanted to have text on there, but I didn't know what to put, so I put the join and expiration dates, except they were crossed out by Darcy with a permanent marker. They also scribbled all over it, because why the heck not? And that's all characters for today. I really wanted to design a third character, but because I spent 20 plus hours on Aster sheets alone, I kinda didn't have the time nor the sanity to do that anymore. I think both of them turned out really awesome though, and this leaves more content for a future video. Which outfits do you guys like the most? Very curious to know. Now, if you enjoyed hearing me ramble about these characters, chances are you'd also like this video where I designed some demons in the same story. Or, if you prefer something short and snappy, here's the Aster animatic I made last year. Thank you guys so much for watching. Special thanks to my Patreons. Will out.